like to call to order the workshop of February 1st, 2021. First on the agenda, we have Jay Brunchick, City-Owned Properties, and Chris Pizek. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. So Chris and I have taken a look at some city-owned properties that are in downtown as well as over toward New Auburn, and seeing what we can do to really stimulate activity in the downtown area as well as New Auburn. And we've identified some properties that we think could really be catalyst properties for the city. Chris, do you want to speak a little bit to the viability and then also the fact that this is going to be an RFP process?
Sure. One of the things that I've learned through the marketing process that One of the things that I've learned through the marketing process of the properties on Main Street and over at Anniversary Park in New Auburn is that while those sites are very attractive, they've been too small to garner the interest of developers who do it every day for a living in order to be able to get the critical mass they need to make their projects financially viable. And one of the things that really excited me about the properties that we're discussing this evening is that, especially with 131 Main Street and 15 Academy Street, those two properties in particular, I think are really going to be are the catalysts that we need in order to be able to leverage relationships with developers who have the horsepower to do significant projects. And those, and by virtue of getting them involved with a bigger project, we will be able to get them to take on these other smaller projects and build that critical mass that we need. Without belaboring the point, the city is in the driver's seat with marketing these properties. You know, my job is to bring qualified developers to the table and to help structure the deals. But at the end of the day, the city's in a position to be able to dictate the terms with these developers and to do what's in the best interest of the taxpayers. So if we don't like a proposal, we can negotiate it. If we still don't like it at the end of the day, you know, you're not obligated to do any of these. We're just out there, we're marketing it, we're providing opportunities to potentially be able to structure a deal.
Okay. So the first one, as we discussed, as Chris had mentioned, is 131 Main Street. That's the parking lot that's behind the parking garage. So here, you've got 0.7 acres. It does bite into the property that the parking garage is on, so we would probably maybe draw a line right about here so that we've got access to the parking garage. But this is one of the sites that we think will really make a big difference. They can go up 6 stories plus an attic on this property. So this is one that I think developers will really have an interest in. And this also, we hope or think that a developer who's interested in this suddenly might become more interested in 186 Main Street. As well as, this is Mechanics Row. So here's the parking garage, here's the parking lot. So when you come out of the parking garage, when you turn right, that's what you're looking at. So that's the piece of property that we're talking about for Mechanics Row. That is about 0.4 acres. According to somebody in assessing, apparently there was a theater on this property at one point in time. Then another property that we're suggesting is 0.2 acres here. These are condominiums right here to kind of familiarize yourself where we are. This is 261, this is Main Street, Academy Street. Here's a picture of the property. Here's another picture of the property. If I back up here, you can see that they've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 condos here. So it's plausible that you could put like 3 or 4 condos here, and the parking would be out back here. Currently, these condos, their access is through our property this way to get into their parking. So if they could do this here, we're in hopes that somebody could do something nice right along here. Then we also have 15 Academy Street. So those condos we were looking at is right about here. The property we were talking about selling, 261 Main Street, is here. This is 1.1 acres. This is one that Chris is really excited about. And in case, here's where the community theater is. So in case, that's looking at the property, and then that's the reverse, looking across the street at the community theater. Then this property, I think everybody's familiar with this, 32 Dunn Street. That is the church in New Auburn. This has been a challenge over time, but I think if we can get it marketed through Chris, we might have a shot at selling this or bringing it to the attention of a developer who can do something nice with it. Then we have 7 and 9 Fern Streets. These are residential lots. I think we could probably do something with these, but it would be more along the lines of residential. So here's a picture of the lots themselves, and there's the school over here, so you familiarize yourself with what we're talking about. But each one of these is 0.1 acres. You could either squeeze a long, narrow house on here too, or do both lots together for a larger, nicer home. And those are the properties we're suggesting. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
There was a discussion over time about the property on Academy Street being part of kind of an arts, I don't know what you would call it, arts area. Is that a part of the consideration when we talk to people who are looking at that property?
Yeah, so, you know, currently with the theater being right across the street, I think that I think Chris believes this lot itself is probably for apartments or condos or some kind of use like that. But I think being right across the street from the community theater could lend itself to some kind of more arts type of project. I think what I like about this is that we're going to issue RFPs, so we get to see what people bring to us. And I wasn't aware of that previous conversation of some kind of arts district or something like that. But we can even write that into the RFP or description of the property, saying, you know, suggesting the types of things we're looking for.
Well, I think on Lisbon Street in Lewiston, they've done something with a property they developed where they have maker space within that property. And I just wonder if that could be something that we think about.
I think it's, you know, if we move for protocol, with all due respect, instead of getting too prescriptive at this point, let's see what the market has to say about this, Chris and Jay, and your expertise. You don't want to close the door on anyone by being overly prescriptive on what you want.
I think what we want to do is get developers who have their suggestions, and as we, you know, a developer can give us what their proposal is, and we can always counter with, you know, some kind of thing with a makerspace or something. But I think right now I'm just seeking, are you guys okay with selling these property, or at least proposing that we sell them? And are you interested in hearing what options developers come up with?
And I do agree with the mayor. We do not want to be prescriptive to shut anybody out, but just that there is this idea.
Right.
So if we could, I'd like to propose one question for the council too. If we could go back to the 131 Main Street.
Yeah.
And I think this is important for the council to talk about and spend a couple of minutes on. Okay. I think it's 131 Main. Yes, that's it.
Parking lot.
Parking lot. Okay, so I'd rather have this conversation now as a council before we get a very excited developer coming in and wanting to develop and then having the conversation post-fact. This currently is free municipal parking spots. Do we have an idea how many parking spots are currently there?
Eric, do you know how many parking spots are there?
No. 30.
34, yeah.
Probably about 30.
I'd say probably a little bit more, but there's some spots. In, Tim, I think we've had these discussions in Katie too as well during our comp plan review. The keys of walkable towns is obviously buildings and infill and so forth. If those spots went away, would we be able to make them up throughout the city, whether it be surface or garage?
Sure. Currently, the parking garage itself is primarily really not used. There's plenty of spaces within the parking garage itself that would open up for, people would start to park in there. The other thing is Mechanics Row right here, depending on the project that were to come here, we could, as part of a package when we work with the developer here, is open this up to two-way traffic. And Eric, would it allow some parking along the street?
Possibly.
Yeah. So there could be some parking along the street as well.
So council, I'll pose a question to you all. Does anybody see a major conflict right now with the potential loss of our surface parking? No. Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Partially, yes, because a lot of people that don't like to park in garage, parks there. And the people that come to service the rope block, they park in there. But to be blunt, it's more than just the parking. I'm not too cool with getting rid of the last open space in our downtown because that space complements our festival plaza. If we develop all around the city, which I'm okay with in the downtown, if we wanted to host any events, we can't do it because Festival Plaza is not big enough. And even if you parked in the street, it's still not big enough. We need to have that open space in that parking lot to hold venues and things.
And I appreciate your opinion on that. Council, any council have an opposite opinion on this? Or a differing opinion? Councilor McLeod?
I agree with what Councilor Gary is saying, but I think if we were able to have, you said 6 in an attic or 5 in an attic?
Yes.
Six.
It was 6 in an attic.
6 in an attic, that the height would allow space around that property for parking, and if we were to look at two-way on Mechanics Row, it would free up a lot more parking on Main Street, or the ability to close Main Street for the larger type events in that case without causing too much disruption to traffic.
So, Council, if we could, is there any objections to any one of these parcels just putting out on the market and starting to look at it? Again, I wanted to pose this question because I did not want to have that debate long-term. I just kind of want to get it out now. Everybody good with this? Good, thumbs up, we're nodding. Jay, Chris?
I got a question.
Oh, Councilor Milks.
I can't tell on this, is the parcel across the street on Academy Street, does it connect to the parcel that's got the 4 condos?
It does.
Five?
It does.
It's-
Up
so
behind
here's
there,
the
right? It's
Academy
all
Street.
The
continued?
hill.
Here's the Academy Street, if you follow my mouse there, that's the 15
Yeah.
Academy Street. This
This
parcel, it's topographically challenged, so it's not, I don't necessarily think you would develop both of these together. I think this would be one project and this would be another. I don't necessarily see it. Eric, would you see this as being steep? It's very steep between here and here, so.
Yeah, it's wooded.
They are adjacent, but it's quite a hill.
Okay.
Councilor Walker?
Yeah, Esplanade, why aren't we showing something with the Esplanade? We own quite a little piece over there.
You mean over in New Auburn,
No, the Esplanade.
Jay, I'll go ahead and
Down next
jump in
to the
on this. So we
Great
do
Falls
have
Plaza.
some parcels over there. I think we're in, as we start looking at future development, we've had some conversations regarding that. Obviously, there's potential there with land that we own, the land that Tom Platts owns, looking at the right development, what would come in. What Councilor Walker is talking about is the downtown transportation center, and around that area is where we currently have land. Some of that parking is utilized based on an agreement that was done with the Hilton to provide, I believe it's 85 parking spaces. And so part of our property is allocated for that. And then when you look at the interim lot, that interim lot where you see all the parking and currently the tent for the testing for COVID, we lease that from Tom Platts currently as parking area. So that's Tom Platts' land. So we do have pieces, and it would be really taking a look at a much larger plan over there to determine where that all best should be divided.
I, just to add, actually reached out to Tom Platts Friday to start talking about what we could do over there and what we could do together over there. But at this point, that's not fully flushed out. But rather than wait until that gets fully flushed out, I think these properties would be good to get them up and going now. And I'm glad you brought it up, because just last week, Phil gave me walking orders to speak with Tom about exactly what you're mentioning.
So the New Auburn piece, is that something separate too? We're gonna deal with that as a separate piece?
It's already listed.
Well, we currently have the one property listed. I think as Chris has found, that one property we have listed is small enough that developers are not seeing that they're gonna get a good return on investment there, that we might wanna take a look at trying to assemble more properties in that area to throw it in along with that property so that it can help be a catalyst. But alone as that one property, it's just not generating the interest. But again, there are opportunities. Again, sort of like with Tom Platts, that's another conversation we need to have about what we could do about maybe to assemble some properties to really trigger something in New Auburn. That one site just doesn't seem to be enough to be a catalyst.
Councilor.
We have been focusing primarily on mixed-use projects for New Auburn and 186 Main Street. One of the things that we may be looking, or I've gotten some bites on just sort of single-use, commercial-type development, a medical office building being one particular, but it would only be a medical office building, in other words, it would sort of be a one-off. It wouldn't be, apartments stacked up on top of it, that sort of thing. If I get an offer I'm bringing it to you, and you folks can debate it, whether that's something you have interest in or not. But because of the size of some of the lots, we may be looking at smaller scale developments, which I don't know whether you're going to have interest in or not, but I'll bring you the offers and we can.
We're not going to say
hash it
no
out.
to anybody. We'll bring them to you to decide. But also, the next conversation really does have to be both over here, Great Falls, but then also New Auburn, and doing what we can to assemble some properties and speak to some property owners.
Councilor Milks?
Yeah, a question for Mr. Brenchick. From his opinion, we've got the Academy Street property, and then there's a property across the street, which is a big area, which is currently the community theater.
Mm-hmm.
But those are continuous with the Academy Street there. I know we've talked about developing the downtown and the walking area. Would that piece of land as a whole, if that was all together, would that be valuable? Would that be something the marketplace would be interested in?
It could be. I think at this point in time, there are some conversations about this property going on now. That's why we didn't add it. But if those break down, we would then probably immediately pull that in as well. The only reason it's not included is this current.
Yeah.
It's currently occupied, yeah. Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just going to piggyback on what the good Council Walker was saying about the New Auburn Village piece of property, Anniversary Park. I'm surprised that tax deferment angle or the TIF wasn't enough to really be carrots to make some developers bite.
I think those incentives are kind of more like an icing on the cake kind of thing, but if a piece of property doesn't lend itself to the return on investment itself, then the project just isn't going to happen. You don't have an incentive. You wouldn't want to generate an incentive so big that it would make somebody want to develop there, because on your end, on our end, tax-wise, we wouldn't see that money back.
Any other questions before I kind of get a little bit more consensus on this, on all these properties? Unless there's a significant majority objection on any one? None being? Okay, cool. Guys.
Mr. Mayor, I still object to the one out here.
I know. It's duly noted. That's why I was looking for a majority objection on anyone. This is well getting ourselves on the path towards downtown infill. It's something we've been talking about since our first retreat. So,
And I'll note that I don't disagree with Councilor Gary on that. So I'd want to see, but I do want to see what's there.
you want to see what's there? It's always good to be fair and honest with a potential developer. So, fair enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Refreshing. The way they talk about it compared to previous.
Next on the agenda, we have Brian, how do you pronounce it? Wood, our assistant city manager. He's going to give us an update of the mayor's ad hoc committee on boards, committees, and commissions.
Happy.
Can't have walkability, parkability, and public transport. You don't need to park everywhere.
Academy, if you look at one way, you could sell it, closing it. No, that's what we do it. One way would be easy. That's how we do it.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is the second time, I believe, that this is before you. Just wanted to provide an update since we last met in October on where we stand on the review of the committee and provide an update. A number of conversations have been had with a number of the chairs and internally with staff, looking at the recommendations that were presented previously to understand how they would ultimately play out and taking into account some of the concerns and considerations that council had articulated back in October. And so there have been a few modifications since then that I wanted to present this evening, and then open it up for discussion and then potentially move into any of the ordinances that would then be impacted by some of these changes. So again, some of the key elements that we were trying to achieve when looking at this restructure is increased communication between committee and councils, increased opportunity for public participation, and creating new and innovative ways to move the city forward. So these are some of the actions that were taken and some of the goals in mind, similar to last time. And so what we really wanted to start with was the Regulatory Advisory Board. This is an area where we were really able to make some gains in streamlining the current structure and creating opportunities for those that are participating in these boards and commissions to meet on a more consistent basis, to make sure that they have the requisite training and skill sets, and to make sure that there's an opportunity for outside entities to come in and provide additional educational opportunities. One of the things that I would note here that was removed, and probably the most important and substantial change, was the removal of the Ethics Committee. Obviously, when paired with a number of these other boards, specifically appeals, there's obviously a conflict of interest, and that was something that was articulated at the committee level. It was articulated here by council and subsequently by staff as well. So we were able to remove that, which also allowed us to streamline the appointment process. We no longer have the school board and or mayor. What you'll see is a straight 7 appointed by the appointment committee and approved by council here. So that does streamline that process, but you still have a reduction of overall members and staying at 7 to fulfill these functions. And so that will still lead to a more consistent meeting structure and elimination of or I guess a little bit easier chance in filling all of these boards and commissions, and making Sue's life a little easier as well. So, any questions there?
This is, I think, as we go through this, there's a lot. There are really 4 chunks. But if you all have any questions on this chunk, ask now, please. That way we can keep everything organized mentally. Okay? Okay.
All
It
right.
should be the easiest one. So, that's good. Should.
Ideally. All right. So on to the next one. Growth and Development Advisory Board changes. So one of the things that we removed here, quite simply, is CDBG from this structure. That is something that we're going to be able to do internally, and we're looking at how to structure that so that there's still that level of engagement, but some of the functions of that committee are going to be brought internal. Other than that, there's still similar recommendations from last time, with one of the planning board members serving on complete streets. You'll see that the staffing assigned to these committees is still the same, and the committee chairs went from 6 to 5, and still 2 council representatives.
So when we say city council 2, on each of these would be 2 city councilors?
No, sorry. So on the advisory board itself, it would be the chair of the 5 committees and 2 council members serving on that advisory board as well.
Thank you.
I would just add, Mayor, if I could, just with this group, so we did meet with most of the chairs on this group. We did get feedback from Conservation Commission. What we'll do is we'll provide that feedback to you, so you'll have a chance to look at it. We'll also include it in the minutes, so the chair's comments regarding conservation will be included. They do have recommendations, more about their recommendations for their actual language within the ordinance is really strictly about just being able to have a better focus of what their assignment is. And you'll see that when you take a look at those edits.
But with regard, and let me just explain the board composition real quickly, just as a refresher from October meeting. The board is kind of instrumental in this and the next grouping, if you would, because this allows direct communication from the city council, vis-a-vis 2 councilors, to all the chairs on this board, and communication up from the committees through the chairs to the city councilors to be reported on. So we should be able to align goals, messaging, and communication seamlessly from city council to committees and vice versa. Councilor?
Just a clarification, so on each of the committees, planning board, ag committee, et cetera, is there one representative of the city council, or no, they just answer to the board?
Currently, as it's designed, no, there would not be a council on each one of those committees. The councilors would just be on the larger advisory board.
This would make sure that you guys didn't have meetings every single night of the month.
Yes, definitely trying to be mindful of that. And as the city manager alluded, we did have the opportunity to have conversations with a number of the chairs, and there was great buy-in overall, I think, on a couple of things, one of which was communication. There was definitely a desire to continue strengthening communication between council and the committees and boards, to have that continued two-way communication, and the opportunity for greater transparency and clarity around the mission of each of the committees and boards was something that was also expressed as an exciting opportunity. And through that, hopefully, there'll be greater opportunity to provide insight and recommendations to council that will have even greater weight than they currently do. So I think those are a couple of the things that we took away. In terms of just a couple of concerns, one thing we heard from the Conservation Commission was just a conversation around the community forest subcommittee, and that is what the city manager articulated will be shared with you all in the coming days. So.
Is there any other questions on growth and development before Mr. Wood continues to the last one? we try to group them as close as possible to similar kind of overarching goals, i.e. growth and development of the city. So we'll go on the next one.
Great. And the last one, a minor change, the removal of the Auburn Public Library from the Community Advisory Board. We were a little ambitious here initially, and not that it won't ultimately fold into this board composition, but currently what we are really trying to do is bring parks and recreation and age-friendly under the Community Advisory Board. And what's really I think unique about this particular advisory board is that this is probably where we would see the greatest growth in the composition of this board as other organizations and committees are formed and or are brought under this umbrella. This is viewed as a vehicle to engage in a number of these different activities and or organizations that are currently occurring, or there's great interest and maybe not necessarily a specific structure or means for them to communicate directly to city council and to have some of those council advocates. And so you can see a dotted line representing friends of committees. Obviously, there are a number of friends of organizations out there, not the least of which Mount Appetite and others that might potentially fall under this. Obviously, there's considerable interest and opportunity in kind of the arts and culture of Auburn, with all that is potentially going on with the mural and a number of different opportunities coming in the next months and years. So what those organizations might look like and how they fold into this is something that we are leaving open, but would certainly imagine falling under here. And so the committee chair number would most likely grow at some point, but it would still be that same structure and that same communication channel. And it would also have 2 counselors that would serve on this advisory board as well.
I would just add, Brian, thank you, great job giving a good overview of this. I would just add that of this group, we did meet with the the chair of the Parks and Rec. I was speaking with Councilor Walker Friday, I believe it was. We did not follow up with Councilor Walker. We should have. I think we had him on the list he was part of the original presentation here, but we will circle back to get any feedback regarding age-friendly. Councilor Walker did share a little bit with me, and he certainly can share now, but I just want to make sure everybody knew that committee we still need to follow up with.
And if I could, we'll open up to the council. This actually, if you think about the creative aspect of this one, excites me of what it could do. I've talked with a lot of non-governmental organizations, okay, friends of, and just nonprofits that are community-based in nature, about what we have as a city and how we can support their efforts for the benefit of the entire city. There really is a lack of knowledge of what's out there for resources that the city could offer, i.e. community development block grants for neighborhood associations, or sports groups, or Friends of Mount Appetite. I think is probably more in the loop than any of the others. But there's a lot of, if we want to start building that groundswell of support from local organizations with their creative ideas to help complement the council and staff, this is where that happens. It would never be taken as control over those groups, but more of, here, come to a meeting, tell us what you think, give us a plan, let us tell you what we have for resources. Initially, I liked the Auburn Public Library City Council representative appointed by the mayor on this too, because there's kind of a uniqueness there and a resource. If I had to, informally, and this is going to be up for later councils, I would probably have one of the counselors be also the council rep for the Auburn Public Library to help build that third-party integration as needed for resources and space. So, but there's a lot of things that future counselors can do here to really do a significant amount of community outreach. And they all, if you can, think of both of these boards as ways to communicate with each other. The counselors on the board are listening to Age Friendly. Age Friendly is talking about walkability. They're talking about senior programs. They can now be conduits to the other boards that we have in the other swim lanes, so to speak, with regards to safe streets, urban development and so forth, so we can really start having some cross-pollination. Because that, if you look at the charges of these committees, is critical for its success and the success of its missions. So thank you, Brian. You did a great job kind of summarizing. And thank you, Councilor Boss and Councilor Gary, as well as others that were on this board and helped out and really gamed, if you would, what this concept would be like and how the flow of conversation would react. So I'm pretty happy with some of the recommendations here. So, Council, any comments, questions, Councilor Boss?
I just want to make sure that the Agriculture Committee recommendations or feedback also get folded in. I know that that was mailed to the city manager, but I want to represent them here as well, just about the moving of the LA Community Forest Board from the Conservation Commission, where it currently sits as a subcommittee, over to Ag. And there was a real consensus among the Ag Committee that it's not a natural fit. And that in large part is because the Agriculture Committee is really focused on the commodification of natural resources on private property, whereas the LA Community Forest Board is all about community engagement and education and awareness building and management of forest assets that are on public property. So the community forest, as well as the street trees and lots of other things. So there's really not a natural fit there.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
So we
that will
can
be
share that as
included,
well.
yes.
Thanks.
So we did meet with Councilor Boss, I apologize. So we did meet with Councilor Boss. So that will be included in your packet as well.
But Ag did talk about the commodization of forest and fiber. That's the separation. Ag is using forest and fiber as a commodity, conservation using community forests as a public access.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions or clarifications?
Just also one other note, in speaking with the Chair of Parks and Rec, and it crosses all of these advisory boards, is also just being cognizant of the meeting frequency of the advisory boards, looking at something in the range of, or the realm of quarterly, understanding that it is an additional meeting, an additional time commitment, but she was very supportive of the overall outcome of greater communication, and so was definitely willing to add that additional meeting, but just wanted to know that was, or make that aware that was something that was brought up.
Let's start with Councilor McLeod, the Councilor Zine.
I just had a question about the Ethics Committee. So who would serve as an Ethics Committee if we're removing that as a standing committee?
It's the same.
Oh, it does, okay.
Yeah, there's no change to ethics.
Okay.
Councilor Zani?
Recycling Committee?
So recycling is an ad hoc, so it's not listed in here because it's not in the ordinance currently.
Thank you.
Any other questions before, on this? Then I think we need to go, are you going to go through the logistics, if you would? Size, application process? Yep. Okay. Any other questions on this board? No? Okay.
Great. And so ultimately, some of the logistical changes that you would see would be all of the, all of the committees and/or advisory, all of the committees would be reducing and creating synergy in the size of their committees. And so the idea is that each of these committees would be comprised of 7 members. Now, that is obviously not to limit the number of participants that are able to come and engage as citizens, but each committee would have a 7-member makeup. And so that does create a level of harmony, but also creates opportunity for internal logistics to ensure that we're able to make sure that these committees are in fact fully comprised. That's something that I think we've found to be a little bit of a challenge at times, which does impact the ability of these committees to complete their tasks. And so that's something that we took away that would definitely be beneficial. So I wanted to kind of transition this conversation into some of the specifics and logistics in the ordinances that are relevant to this restructure, if that's all right. All right, great. So in the packet, there were a number of challenges with looking at some of the strikes and through lines. And so for ease of us to review here this evening, these are the same changes that you saw in your packets. You're just able to see the strikes and additions more clearly. And so we can walk through and garner general consensus as we move through. So first and foremost, article boards and commissions and committees. It's the amending of, to provide the advisory board oversight and communication between boards and commissions and the committee as well as elected officials. So this is simply reaffirming and establishing what we had discussed previously about the advisory boards being that communicative liaison structure that we have agreed to. And the second addition is the addition of section 2383, salaries of planning board members. It reads, appointed planning board members shall receive a salary at the rate of $25 per meeting for up to 26 meetings per year. The planning board chair shall receive a salary of $30 per meeting for up to 26 meetings per year. Associate members shall receive a salary of $25 per meeting for up to 26 meetings per year. And I do remember that this was previously brought before council, and there was the articulation that most communities do in fact pay their planning board. It does range, some as marginal as $10, and some take the form of a stipend. It really does vary and does go up from there. But to create alignment with the school committee and based on the level of effort and expertise, that is something that has been brought before council.
So financial impact on this would be $6,500 a year
For both.
for that entire section, correct? And maybe if there's not any concern, because I'm just want to make sure we're mindful of time, I think we've given you a good concept. This was the one that actually established the advisory board and created the pay, which is something that came from the ad hoc committee as a recommendation. So those are really the two that we need to make sure if those are in place, that's the actual language. The rest are just changes to the language to accommodate for what we've already talked about. So we don't need to go through each one of those line items. You have it in front of you. But these are the two that I really wanted Brian to cover.
Councilor Milk, 1 second, Brian. Councilor Milk, you had a question?
Quick question on the pay piece. Did we do was there some evaluation on what the issue, or would that be a sufficient amount to encourage somebody that might be qualified and not really ready to go, that $25 a meeting is going to entice somebody to then come forward and volunteer for $25 a week?
Can I take a whack at this, just from our conversations, if you don't mind? Because I think, first of all, the comparative municipal levels of pay is important to know. We've done that. But I just want to add to your question, if I could. The enticing of someone to do it, no, it's not going to entice anyone really to do it. But I think what it does is it looks at compensating someone for the knowledge of the research they have to put in to do an effective job. It's not going to make a world of difference in someone's overarching budget as a household, but what it does do is it adds importance and gravity, if you would, to what they're doing. This is a mirror of the school committee compensation.
Correct.
25 and then 30 for the chair. And of course, as we know, the school committee has an extremely important and, job to do that requires a lot of outside meeting research. Planning board does as well. So I think this helps reinforce the importance. So I'll turn it back over to Brian.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. That was the line of reasoning there, and the only other piece I would add is, yes, this is in line with other municipalities in Maine that do pay. As I said, there is a range, but we did find with municipalities that are our size and some that are larger, $25 to $35 per meeting for those duties and responsibilities is common.
Is there any other questions on that part? And they'll follow the guidance of the city manager on this. Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I was the only committee member that wasn't too cool with paying the planning board members a stipend. I mean, granted, they do an awful lot of hard work, heavy lifting, but the Ag Committee, they're going to be eventually in full swing and do as much heavy lifting as the planning board. Are we going to give them $25 too? Or CDBG, they do an awful lot of heavy lifting at times. Are we going to do there? Where does it start, where does it begin, and where does it end?
I think we discussed this in the meeting. It ends here because there's heavy lifting, and then there's tactical and technical proficiency, and the demand to follow state law. And that is a huge aspect, and I could defer out to Councilor Carey or Councilor Boss. The demands of being a planning board member, former planning board members, on the state regulations, the laws, and guidance is significant. And the ability, the fact that you all have to extend or attend classes at the state level through MMA and so forth is pretty heavy. But if you would like to speak a little bit to clarify, I'm just going off what I remember being told.
And Councilor Carrier jump in here as well, but yeah, you absolutely have to have that training by the state. I mean, you're offering hearings on a monthly basis for people who are coming in and doing applications. You have adjudication authority. I mean, it's a pretty significant role, and I think it takes as much time to read through the planning board packets as it does for our city council packets, truly.
Yeah,
Councilor Carrier, thoughts?
Very completely. It's with what you have to go through these packets and keep current with the stuff. It's worthy to do.
I think that and the variable that you mentioned about the adjudication power, they are an adjudicating body that meets regularly, and that is an extremely important thing to the future economic success of the city. Anybody else? Any other comments?
Helpful.
No? Good?
No, I was just saying, that's helpful, to understand the differentiation. It's a good question.
Yes. Councilor Lasagna, then Phil?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, go
Just to
ahead.
quickly add to that, also, when you think of school committee members, their decisions have a big impact on our budget. So I think that's another thing to take in consideration in terms of what the school committee members have to be educated about, understand, and act on.
We didn't touch salaries in school committee on this. I think we mentioned it, and we very quickly thought that it was out of our purview, so we stopped. But point taken, you know, if you're going to get there's some different theories on if you're going to get perfection or expertise, you probably have to compensate for it in certain ways. Phil?
So if there's nothing further, thank you, Brian. This was a good overview of where we were with bringing back the changes that came from the last time that we presented this. Also feedback from some of the chairs, and again, we will circle back. We might have one more update on this one with a follow-up of a couple additional chairs moving forward. Brian, if you could just jump right first to the information sheet on ordinance review process. So I just want to, I know we have a lot, your packet was over 300 pages, so we are sending a lot at you. But I just want to again touch base on what the process will be as we continue with the ordinance review. What you will see moving forward, we'll be putting together a document that really has each chapter, then with, say there's 20 changes in that chapter. Each one of those will have a list out, those 20 changes of a summary of what that change was. So you could quickly go through when it comes time for us to move forward with these and be able to say, okay, we're ready to move forward on this one and continue moving down that list. Rather than looking at the entire ordinance book, we'll start off with that document. For tonight, what I want to do is just cover, because you've had a chance to look at these, I just want to get some feedback from you on some of these. We already covered Chapter 2. That's what Brian just covered. Chapter 60 under Board of Appeals, that is just the language that fixes if we were to make the change with the boards and commissions. That's what that language covers. Under Chapter 34 under Parks and Rec, the under that definitions. One thing that has been really held up because we thought we were going to be doing this process sooner was the rec department had worked with Healthy Androscoggin to develop language regarding tobacco use on our parks, fields, open spaces, playgrounds. We just hadn't got to it. It had been probably sitting in the queue now for over a year, waiting for us to move forward with this. So the language you see on Chapter 34 is bringing in that language that was worked on by the rec department and Healthy Androscoggin to present that language regarding tobacco and marijuana also within those open spaces. So that's that language. Chapter 44, under solid waste, this has come up several times, and so now's the time to tackle it. There are many questions regarding just trash bags on the side of the road when it's time for waste pickup. The language in the ordinance talks about an airtight container, and then for whatever reason, it then goes on, or a suitable trash bag. Well, that's not the same. And so we need to clarify that. And if the desire of the council, and we've heard from citizen, Larry Pelletier, speak quite frequently regarding the amount of waste that comes as a result of just putting trash bags, especially in our multi-unit apartments in our downtown New Auburn area. We would propose, if this is what the council would like to see, saying that that requirement would actually be what the first section of that ordinance refers to as an airtight container. If that's something you would like to put in the language, then we will move forward with that. But we'd like to know, is that a desire, or we'll clean up the language so it's not as confusing, but it would allow trash bags. It's really a decision by the council on what you'd like to do with that.
Looking for action now?
I'm looking for some guidance.
I mean, when you talk, you're saying an airtight container can also just include a bag, a plastic bag.
Currently, the way it's worded, it says airtight container
Tightish.
or
Sort of
a plastic bag.
So I think we should default to an airtight container. Airtight, to me, a word I'm not really sure. Is there a better way to describe a covered, closed garbage?
That's really what it's referring to.
So I think we got to get away from and for Mr. Pelletier, as much as anything else, is to actually say it's got to be airtight, or whatever we call them.
Yeah, a container with a
Covered
lid.
trash can.
Correct. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We got to be careful if we just say, put your trash in an airtight container, because they can just put it in the container when the the trash truck comes up, they open the cover, and then they dump it, and you get all that trash everywhere.
And I think that was the intent of the language. I think the intent of the language was that it would be in a plastic bag, which would then be placed inside the container.
Right.
It's just not worded that way. You're absolutely right. So we would fix that language.
So do we go and say, in a plastic bag, in an airtight
Yeah,
container?
your container would have no loose trash. It would have to be in a plastic bag.
Okay.
I'm breaking that law every Monday. Counselor?
Just it's not so much a problem. I guess I'm looking for more of if we're going to talk about putting it in a container, I'd like a standardized container, because, on any trash day in the city, you can drive down the road and there's lids all down the road. The trash cans have blown all down the road. I have a trash can that the lid is actually connected to it. It's crushed, smashed to pieces. So if we're going to come out with a standardized thing, we might want to come out with one that has some durability to it and that can't be just whizzed out on the road. I understand that those guys have a really nasty job to do, and they're on a time schedule, but finding the lids down the road someplace, then there goes your airtight container. And as everybody knows, the ravens and the crows in town are very intelligent about getting into the bags. So if we're going to do that, I just would like to see some kind of standardization to the containers.
I'll play devil's advocate. I'm not taking this position, but I just will throw it out there. Once you own something and you dictate or detail exactly what the requirements are, and I'll use our mailboxes and our policy on mailboxes as an example, you own it. So when we stipulate that you must have a trash can of certain dimensions with a lid which I have. Then when that becomes destroyed or damaged, the question is, do we replace it? Are we responsible for that? Are we responsible for when the trash company that we contract with doesn't pick up on Mondays because it's a holiday, let's say, and they don't follow through the next Tuesday, so you have to skip a week, which happens a lot in my neighborhood because we have Monday trash pickup. Do myself and my neighbors have to buy additional cans for those 4 or 5 Monday holidays where they skip a week? Because right now, today, or whatever, I had loose bags. So, I mean, I just want to, again, I'm not taking a position either side, but I want to bring up what the reality is of this and the enforceability, which might be
Well,
problematic.
I was going to say, enforcement. Who's going to enforce it? What are the repercussions? What are the ramifications? Does the solution cost more than the problem? If we do that, I mean, who's going to do it?
Councilor Clark?
I just have questions about limiting it to a 33-gallon capacity as well. The trash trucks have the pneumatic hook that will take larger barrels, and I see a ton of larger barrels out there.
I think we would recommend to change that.
Okay.
So you're right, I did have that on the note to have that discussion, because they are capable now with the hook to be able to pull that in.
So who's going to be the enforcement mechanism of it? Who would?
So currently, we use Pine Tree for enforcement of issues that they come across, and enforcement in the sense that they don't clean it, they don't pick it up. And so if there's someone who, say, is a multi-unit apartment building that's not on their list, the enforcement piece is they keep driving by. They notify Public Works, and now becomes the challenge. You have a code enforcement department, so you have the 2 departments that are now working on that to say, okay, who's going to contact the property owner, let them know you're in violation, that needs to be cleaned up, or whatever the issue might be. So you're absolutely right. There is violations currently. There'll be violations moving forward. It's just what will the policy be? And now that we have clear language, can we move forward and enforce it?
If I could, maybe a compromise here. There's always something about using a hammer on everybody, the entire city, because of issues that are kind of narrowly focused. Do we have any data showing that really the trash, it's due to multifamily units, single-family homes? Is it urban, suburban, or rural? Where are these issues coming from? Because if it's multifamily, I do believe, and I can't remember, maybe you have it right there, more than 3 units is commercial pickup, and you have to pay the trash pickup fee. Could we mandate that this 55-gallon container with a closable lid, be for multifamilies versus single-family? I don't want to pick on the multifamilies per se, but let's find out where the error is. Because, I pick up my trash when it spills out from Pine Trees, grabbing it, it happens, I pick it up. Where is that not happening, I think is a question.
Well, the challenge is that when it's your trash, you know it's yours. When you're at a multifamily, I'm not sure whose trash that was, but it's on, and now nobody's taking ownership of it, and it stays. I think that we could do that. We have one of the policies that we could put in place, that if a multi-unit was a sign-on for us to pick up their waste, which many do, the requirement would be there would be this standard for them to put their waste out, for us to collect it. So that could be an option we could do. I could certainly check with Dan to find out what that list is. Like I said, it's a pretty lengthy list. So you wouldn't do the standard across the board for everyone, but you would have a standard for those who have to opt in to have their waste picked up, which means that they're paying the city to have their waste picked up. Their waste would have to be on the side of the road in a container. That would be an option that you could start
Thoughts?
with.
Council thoughts? It's a middling step. Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This brings me back to when we were talking about recycling and the type of bin or can that we were looking at or wanted to use, about if the trash barrel is too big, then seniors or those that have other difficulties can't haul a trash can from their house to this curb. So
I think it
I
was
don't know.
up to, not, it has to be a minimum of the larger size, but it was up to that size is allowed.
Okay.
Yeah.
As long as we're not demanding a 32-gallon trash can or more for each homeowner, or,
Correct.
It was up to.
Up to.
Yeah.
okay.
Any other questions or comments about, again, just kind of focusing on that middle step, the multifamily?
I think one of the problems with our trash cans is, no matter how big you may say they can have or should have, it's when you skip a week, or it's when the holidays come around when you have a lot more trash. They still try to fit them in that same barrel, but it ends up out of the barrel 3 feet, and the blackbirds just tear it all apart because it's in these trash bags that are easy for a blackbird to rip up. And the other thing is, we've never forced people to use barrels because they put out any color trash bag they want to put out, and the thickness means a lot. Blackbirds can take them white bags, rip them open in a matter of 10 seconds versus the heavy-duty black bags that are made for trash.
So does the council want to take that step of looking at mandates for multifamily units on airtight containers plus bags? Do you want to mandate it citywide, or do you want to leave it as is? Staff has a recommendation, I believe, or at least that proposal,
The recommendation from staff was just for clarification.
clarification, okay. Is there any other thoughts?
Question I had for Mr. Mayor, you mentioned an opt-in, and is that, are we talking about over 4 units for those? Is there something that exists today, or is that a?
So the language as it exists today is that we will only pick up waste. I believe the limit, Eric, do you know, is it anything, we don't pick up waste for anything greater than 3 units, is that correct?
Okay.
3 or more.
Okay, unless it's owner occupied, that's correct.
That's consistent with the rules.
So if you're not, then that means you need to opt in. And so they need to register with the Public Works. They get on that list, and then they have their waste picked up, and they pay to have their waste picked up.
And that's
as well.
today's policy?
That's today's policy.
Okay.
Thoughts on this, based upon what we just discussed? Is there any action that we'd like to give staff going forward? Councilor Zanya?
So are you asking us about 2 things? One, about the multifamily units, and do we want to change something with that? And should we codify this to say that it needs to be up to a 32-gallon covered trash can with plastic in there?
Yeah, I think the actual gallon count is higher than that, but yes, yes. So, I mean, there's 2 things. Obviously, we can leave it the way it is. We can, codify it, I think, airtight, trash can with a lid. We know there's going to be some non-conformity with this, regardless of the size of the can, especially on those Monday holidays. I've got the same issue. But it is a step forward. That's citywide. Or we can kind of isolate what the potential problem is, which theoretically might be the multifamily units in which the city has to pick up the trash, and just implement it for those properties that are in that program.
I would say we should start with saying it needs to be a covered trash can with your trash in a plastic bag.
For the entire city, or just a district, or just a specific,
City.
for the entire city?
Do we have any data to show that multifamilies are more problematic with trash pickup, or is that? an
So
assumption?
I don't know, well, I guess we could go back and probably find complaints, and I would say pretty much all of the complaints go back to a multi-unit.
Okay, thank you.
And do you think it's because they don't have covered cans?
Absolutely. They don't have and then it's the ownership piece too, which is really challenging.
But when you mandate for citywide something, whether it be recycle bins or trash cans, we own it as a city. Councilor Carrier?
Do we have any stipulations from Pine Tree as far as what they will pick up and what they'll take? You hear in other cities around the state that it can't be black bags, it can't be blue bags, it have to be clear bags, they have to be this bag or that bag. Do we have stipulations from them as to what they take or what they can take? Or
There
it
is, yeah, there is, but it typically does not have to do with anything with the color of the bag or anything else. A lot of those communities is because of recycling, and it's a paper bag kind of a system. And then other communities, and for Auburn, I can just say, there was a proposal, I don't remember how many years ago, maybe 10 years ago, where it was moving in the direction that through the new program, the city would provide all of the waste cans as part of the recycling initiative. And that just never moved forward. So in those communities, I would say, yes, they have standards because it aligns with their recycling initiative. Because some communities will have a much larger recycling bin, and then the requirement is you're going to have a much smaller general waste bin. And that's what you need to put your trash out in every week, and it's nothing greater than that. So yeah, different communities have those different regulations. But currently with Pine Tree, pretty much whatever we ask them to do, they're going to do it within the contract.
Okay, wait, I'm going to go in order. Counselor Walker?
It's okay.
No, and one of the other problems are with these apartment houses that have too small of a big container, which they call it outside there, the trash piles up all around it all week.
Absolutely.
I mean, that should be an enforcement that we should be able to take care of in a hurry.
Yep.
But it goes on and on and on all year. That's worse than half our people that put out the trash.
So the one that Councilor Milks is pointing at me about is we have probably a half a dozen or more citations, and we're waiting for court. As soon as COVID changes and the courts can schedule, that'll be addressed. But absolutely, Councilor Walker, that is an issue.
Counselor Mills?
Maybe the language should be a standard as opposed to mandate. Standard becomes,
I think it's either you do it or you don't, because then you really don't have any enforcement to move forward if there is a violation. That would be my only recommendation.
Counselor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When we pick up leaves and that type of debris, are we going to be still accepting that in bags? Or now is that going to be an added can that goes out to the street?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think on the website, I think it says you're allowed to put out a certain amount of bags of leaves. I think we would allow that language to continue.
If the crows got in the leaves, they just go back on the ground. Frustrating, but not bad. Anything else? So I'm trying to put this together. I think
the majority is multifamily, start there. And then if there's, then you have another time where if as a group, you want to make that change, you'll do that as an amendment as this is presented.
multis, we're talking the 4 and higher or 5 and higher?
think it's-
I can talk with staff, we'll find out what that number is.
3.
Starts after
I think it's 3 and high.
After 3, I think.
Could be. Well, we'll get clarity on that. And then maybe at the same time, we can look at
Be the way
just some data
banks
points
look at it.
on citations or violations by unit. But I think intuitively, I think it's some of the multifamilies that probably are contributing in our downtown. Okay, very good then.
Chapter 61, which is a moratoria, so the moratorium on social clubs and retail medical marijuana caregivers, that has expired. It's currently in the ordinance, so we would ask that that be taken out. That's why that's there. And then, Eric, I don't know if you want to come up. Chapter 60 and Chapter 52, you have a lot of changes. So let's just start off with Chapter 60. I would say you've got about 50 some odd recommendations. Some of these are just cleaning up grammatical kind of areas that they found. But I thought that they did a great job of providing you a good summary sheet of what the recommendations were on this. And Eric, any of them that are not the cleanup, I think we can move beyond that, but any of them that are really the ones that we probably should have a good discussion about.
Yeah, so the first two sections really are cleanups, misreferences, title changes, misspellings, capitalization, that kind of thing. And then beginning on page 60 in your packet is the actual changes that we considered to have some substance to them. The first one is that for whatever reason we required a different lot depth for a 4-family. That was not required for a 3-family or for a 5-family. It required a higher lot depth. We think that was an error, but it is a change that changes the requirements for a multifamily home in the multifamily suburban district. Similar change in the multifamily urban district. Although there's a typo in our list, it references 200 feet, number 4 for a width where it really should be 50 feet for multifamily urban lot frontage. One of the other more substantive ones that we come up against a lot is number 2, the buildings per lot. Sometimes you'll drive around town and you'll see a house with a really odd looking attachment to a garage, a covered breezeway or walkway that just looks out of place. We allow 2-family dwellings in almost every residential zoning district currently, but they have to sit in a single structure. So to get around that, to put a unit over a garage, people will construct long walkways connecting the 2 buildings just so they can say they're in a single structure. Staff is proposing that we change that. We don't think it's necessary. It adds to the cost. The big difference is you could actually create more separation between the single-family home that sits on a lot and a unit above a garage, but they could be two standalone structures. So we just want to make sure that the council actually thinks about that and is comfortable with that
It makes
as
sense.
a change. It would only be
Only makes sense.
allowed in zones where you can already have two units on the property, but they could be separated. Number 5 on the list, beginning on page 60 of your packet, is just changing the density tables reflected in the changes that I mentioned in 1 and 4, where we got rid of that different lot size for 4-unit buildings.
Eric, can you just pause for a minute? I just want to make sure Brian can find, because so people watching at home, can you just get that maybe to the sheet of where you're referencing?
You guys overperformed on this. There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot. That's a lot of house cleaning.
So here's the buildings per lot. Sorry about that. As we go down, this is the number 5, changing the table that deals with the 3 and 4 families being removed and just considered as any other multifamily. Lot sizes would still go up as you add units. There's a density standard, but we would just let that lot size dictate the depth of the lot if they had the minimum frontage. Number 6, delete the downtown enterprise zone. As of a couple of meetings ago, the council has replaced it in its entirety with a form-based code district. Number 7, there's a misreference to the permitted uses in the general business district, in the general business 2 district, and it really should reference the permitted uses in the general business 2 district under that section. That's number 7. Number 8, we have a section that's currently reserved, and one thing that has come up over the last couple of years is we show an open space district in the form-based code. We basically covered some of the city's parks and the Riverwalk with an open space district, but we don't actually describe that in the ordinance text itself, and a couple of times we've had questions about that. We'd like to clarify that. Number 9, is a reference that shows that a new building needs to be built at or above the base flood elevation. Elsewhere in the ordinance and through state requirements, we're actually required to elevate a new residential structure to 1 foot above the base flood elevation. So this is a reference to clean that up and match the standard that exists elsewhere. Number 10 is in our shoreland zoning ordinance, and this one I think is substantial for a small number of properties, but it will make a difference on some properties that we've talked to people about over the last 5 years or so. If you are in the shoreland zone and you have a lot that is less than 120 feet deep currently, then instead of the minimum setback of 100 feet that most of the shoreland zone has, your minimum setback is 50% of your lot depth. We find a lot of lots that are just over that 120-foot depth. So if they were 2 feet short, if their depth, say, is 121 as an example, if their lot was 119, they would have a 60-foot setback. Because they're over 120, they actually have a 100-foot setback. And if you only have 120 feet to work with, it doesn't leave room for a building. We're proposing to expand that to be able to apply the 50% lot depth standard to lots up to 150 feet in depth, whereas when you get beyond 150 feet in depth, then generally you're finding some room without that exception to place a building on that lot. The next one, more clerical, we really use electronic copies more than we did when our ordinance was drafted, so we're starting to replace some of the paper copies that we require with PDF copies. And then number 12, we really don't need a CAD disk anymore. A PDF emailed copy is more convenient. and Mylar copies, we were still requiring those until a year or so ago because the registry still required a Mylar and a paper copy. They no longer require a Mylar, so there's no reason for us to continue to require a Mylar. We'll replace all those references to just electronic copies instead of CAD, computer-aided drafting disc, or Mylars. We don't need as many plans because some board members and most of staff now are using PDFs, so we'll reduce the numbers that are required. The number 15 is significant and in a good way, in my opinion. Over time, the state has changed their definition of subdivision and what we're allowed to exempt from subdivision. Multifamily housing now has to be reviewed as a subdivision, except under really strict standards. And we have a recreation open space standard that was really drafted to cover single-family homes back 20 years ago that requires a minimum acreage per unit or the value of that acreage on a similar lot to be dedicated towards creating open space, recreation space for the units. When you're talking about a quarter-acre lot downtown and requiring 1 acre for the first 10 lots and then a piece of land for every lot after 10 acres, if you're putting 10 units on a quarter-acre lot downtown and you're requiring the value of an acre of open space in a similarly priced lot, you're really making it financially impossible to create multifamily housing. The value of an acre of land in a district that allows 10 units on a quarter of an acre is just exceedingly expensive. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars. It wasn't intended to be applied that way, but due to changes in definition, and now a subdivision does include multifamily housing and redevelopment. So we'd really like to take that out, apply it to single-family residential development as we did in the beginning, and not have that inhibiting the development of multifamily housing. Number 16 is just updating references to the standards that the state is using for phosphorus and erosion control now. Our reference is outdated, no longer used, and really not available on the state's website anymore. And electronic signs, significant for a couple of properties. When we changed from community business 1, 2, and 3 to our form-based codes districts, we changed most of those areas to T5 and T6 form-based code, not the T4s that we see in the neighborhoods, but T5 and T6 is like from the railroad bridge along Turner Street to here and along Court Street and continuing up the hill towards Spring Street. We have a number of banks and businesses that already have message signs in those areas. We don't see those going away over time, and we think it's cleaner to just allow them in those districts than it is to try to make them go away over time. So that's it from my perspective for a really quick overview on the zoning changes.
I'm just thinking about time constraints here, and I want to open up for some questions. Are there other proposed ordinance reviews that you want to discuss today too?
So the rest of the changes, there are 3 sheets for Chapter 60. The rest of the changes are really misspellings, punctuation, capitalizations, and unintentional misreferences where we've deleted a section but didn't get rid of the reference. This section, these 17 changes are the substantive.
That's your meeting. Okay, so thank you for that. We have a couple minutes now. We can carry this over into communications later on. I do want to have a 5-minute break before our regular meeting, so nobody's rushed. Councilor Zanya?
Thank you. Electronic signs, when people decide to put up an electronic sign, is there anything, do they have to apply, ask? I know we're giving permission, we're not trying to prevent it, but with too many electronic signs in a dense area, it can really change the character of an area.
We do have a permit requirement for them. We require signs for all, permits for all permanent signs on properties that are not purely free speech, but they're used for advertising a product or a service in some way. And we do have more standards for electronic signs than we do for other signs. It requires a sign off from the police department and a review to make sure that they don't interfere. The most common interference would be if you were lining one up with a traffic signal, say. They're reviewed to not have red and green lights that would line up with a traffic signal or be in that that vehicle's view while they're waiting at the traffic signal.
So I understand that, but just the consideration of aesthetics is what I'm asking about. If we continue to just allow electronic signs.
Yeah, there are limitations on how they're used, not using video and moving pieces, but there's no spacing requirement or anything that would really get at the aesthetic concern of having too many in one area. I think we could not allow them, we wouldn't see any more in those areas. Or we could at some point decide there's enough and change the standard if we feel like getting too many.
I think it's worth keeping in mind if we're trying to create sort of a village atmosphere.
Well, it depends on what your definition of village is, I suppose. And from a business standpoint, I've heard from people with message signs that they would like to have, one was actually downtown would like to have a ticker, the stock exchange ticker going across, which is a symbol of, okay, economic prosperity. You know, people are paying attention, but our current ordinance doesn't allow that because that is quote unquote animation. Huge conversation to have, I think. But it is, I guess, in the eye of the beholder. Is there any other questions about any of these 17?
Yeah, the electrical sign that you're talking about, could that be used on South Main Street if we wanted it on the upper end heading out towards the golf course?
No, not, it couldn't currently, and we're not proposing a change that would allow that. This is really limited to the core downtown in New Auburn, and then on this end of town from basically just beyond Mechanics Row, back up Main Street to Court Street, up to Spring Street, and out Turner Street to the Railroad Bridge. And then beyond that, they're already allowed in the general business zone.
As a small business, that doesn't sound very fair to me. You're going to allow that type of sign on Turner Street or even on Main Street there, but you're not going to allow us to go towards South Main Street.
And I think that's up to you as a council. When we changed from central business 1, 2, and 3, which was really just in this core downtown area, to form-based code, that was left out. If you wanted to go beyond that, that's certainly within your purview. There's nothing under the state law that would limit you from allowing them more broadly than what we're proposing.
Well, I know we've got private businesses that are looking to ask to be able to put a sign up. And you're talking South Main Street for a business, you're only talking three businesses up through there. It definitely isn't going to overload that part of the city, that's for sure.
Yeah, I was comfortable proposing this as kind of a cleanup because they were allowed there before, but you can absolutely go beyond that.
Councilor Walker, you were on the city council 4 years ago, I believe. Lost Valley actually wanted to have electronic message sign for their business. And was it the council or the planning board shot it down? It was highly controversial. I know I was the abutter and I didn't care, but
I don't remember it, but I don't believe it was the council that shot it down.
maybe it was planning board then. I think,
The planning board was asked to modify for that sign. I don't think that it passed.
so this is cleaning up, I suppose, during the, if we talk about procedure, if we want to amend this either way, then what we'll do is when this comes back up for adoption, we'll go through the normal motion amendment process and the appropriate debate on that topic by topic, whether or not we want to open it up or quote unquote a village feel, what have you. Okay? Any other questions?
I think it's only fair that not only the inner city has the right to these signs, because you've got I think we should look at them one at a time. If they come in and they want an okay to put one, it should be looked at as an individual and we vote on it. If we do that with liquor licenses, so why wouldn't we do it with a special sign going out?
Okay.
Yeah, I know there's a big sign out near my neighborhood. It's a big, bright sign. It's outside of the downtown.
General business zone, probably, if I know correctly. So let's talk about that, Phil. We can discuss individual sign permission outside of, let's say, designated zone, historical designated zone, because there is a fairness factor. Is there any other questions on any of these other 17 zoning changes that are proposed by Eric and staff? No? Okay, very good. Eric, thank you very much, and Brian and Phil, on this. This is I've looked at the grammatical changes, if you would, going forward. It's good cleanup. I'm just going to clean up. Nicely done. That's a lot of painstaking line-by-line work. We're going to now take a break for the next 5 minutes. If there's more that needs to be discussed on ordinances, we can pick that up during the communications portion of tonight's meeting. Thank you. We'll now stand on recess for 5 minutes. I will now call to order this meeting of February 1st, 2021. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, folks. We have two consent items on the agenda tonight. I'll entertain a motion at this time.
So moved.
Motion from Councilor McLeod, second from Councilor Walker. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Abstain? Passes unanimously. Next, we have the minutes of the January 19th, 2021 regular city council meeting. Are there any corrections? If not, I'll entertain a motion at this time to approve the minutes of the January 19th, 2021 regular city council meeting.
Motion to approve.
Motion from Councilor Walker. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Councilor Milks. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Minutes are approved by a vote of 7-0. Now on to communications, presentations, and recognition. We're just going to open this up to the city manager and staff. Is there anything that he needs to wrap up on ordinance review?
So I could go through chapter 52 if the council wanted. I'm looking outside, there's no snow coming down yet, so it wouldn't take very long, but I could certainly do that currently, right now if you like.
It's right there. No, it's right there.
You see a snowflake?
Yep, for sure.
All right, chapter 52, I'd really encourage you to look at Chief Moen's memo.
What page is that on?
75?
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Okay.
So page 275. Brian, could you bring that up? Just as memo, I think we could walk through there. One thing that Chief Moen had mentioned was that this section of the ordinance was probably, even though we went through a codification, there was really no changes under that codification in 2010. So the real last changes to any of these ordinances were in 1967. Since then, there's been a great deal of statute changes as it pertains to traffic and vehicles. You'll see that most, and I don't believe I need to go through these, but most of these are currently established by state statute. And so anywhere where there's a state statute that references it, law enforcement would use the state statute before they would use the city ordinance. Many times it's because there is a state statute that says you must use state statute and not use a local ordinance. Because the state of Maine says any fines, fees, and what have you as it pertains to sections of the state statute that are in existence, you must use their law and not your local ordinance. This was tried several years ago in the city of Portland when they tried to establish speeding ordinances. And even though there were state statute regarding speeding, the state of Maine then quickly did their emergency bill, got that change in the statute that then said you cannot have an ordinance that would trump the state statute and circumvent those fees from going to the state. So these really should be cleaned up and we should not use them. And as I said, they're currently not being used. If you continue down to page 2 of his memo, this next one is 52-36. Now this one is not a state statute, so this is one that we probably should cover, and it's regarding truck routes. Currently, truck routes is probably one of is a significant challenge to enforce. With GPS units the way that they are today, most trucks will just drive wherever the GPS is telling them to take as a route. And so the recommendation from the chief on this was that to strike this section because it's just not enforceable. State statute does allow you to continue with it, to prohibit truck travel. We could certainly continue with that, just with the understanding that it really is difficult to enforce this. Any questions regarding that?
How often is this not followed?
Daily?
Okay, because if it's not an enforceable law, then it's not or ordinance is not a good one.
Yeah. You know, it certainly is a challenge for residents who live on a road that might be no truck through traffic. If you keep it and knowing that it's there, there could be an opportunity, this is what we've had in the past, is somebody will say, it's this company's truck that's coming through here all the time. When it's those, then we do enforce them. We go out, we make contact with that business, and we let them know that, hey, here's a violation that's taking place, please talk to your drivers. And typically, they will, and then new drivers will come in, and we may have to revisit it. It's not a bad one to keep. I'm not, I would be okay if everybody here is like, well, let's go ahead and keep this, knowing that it's just really a challenge to enforce this.
I'm going to give you one example that I've heard from a lot of constituents. GPS cut through on Route 4 is Hotel Road, West Auburn Road, North Auburn Road, Lakeshore Drive, or Maple Hill area. That seems to be causing a lot of complaints in that neighborhood in Ward 1. I think more signage as a deterrent, knowing that enforceability is difficult, I think could probably help calm this down, especially with those frequent commuters that are going up to, let's say, Sugarloaf or Rangeley.
Okay, so we'll remove this one, and we'll have, we'll take a look at what we can do, come up with a plan. 52-121 is regarding leaving keys in an unattended vehicle. So the way the current statute reads is that an officer would actually be constituting an illegal search if they were to enter your vehicle because your keys were in it. We'd rather not do that, so it's just best that we take this section right out. The ordinance that said you're not allowed to keep your keys in a vehicle unattended, and if you did, the police officer can come by and take your keys out, and then you can give us a call and we'll bring your keys back.
And leave a note.
What's that?
I like to leave a note for
And
you.
leave a note, yes.
We want to take that out, correct?
Yeah. So we're going to strike this because it's a violation of the Fourth Amendment. And then if you look at section 52-178, lights on parked vehicles, this is no longer enforceable. This is regarding you must have lights that are on a vehicle 500 feet in distance. If you're parked on the side of the road, whether it's unattended or attended, this is not anything that we would enforce. 52-205, failure to comply with a citation. Prosecution of traffic citation falls under state law. So parking citations that remain unpaid after 48 hours double in fines. This change is the current police practice. No longer the prosecution of other traffic fines. And then I just want to jump to the next one. That's section 52-259, parent's responsibility. The parent of any child and guardian of any ward shall not authorize and only permit any such child or ward to violate any provision of this article. There's state juvenile statute currently that would be specific to parental and guardian responsibility, so that we can go ahead and strike that. There's multiple sections, that's why they're not included in here, but state statute currently covers all that. (52-264). This is speed limits for persons riding a bicycle. This ordinance is not enforceable, so we would propose just striking this language.
You obviously haven't seen me on my Peloton.
Glad it's stationary. And then if you were to move further, Brian, if you mind going down, just parades, funerals, and processions. This gets to a few other sections where the strike-through language is available for you. It just reflects the current practice regarding funeral processions. A permit process is unnecessary. They don't currently do that. Basically what takes place is they just give us a call if they have a large procession that's taking place, and we go out and we assist. But we do not require a permit or that process. 52-93. This is regarding private contractors and vendors that are doing work on a public way. We have current language that lists about 18, 19 roadways that would require them to actually hire a uniformed officer at the construction site. Currently, so when you do see them at a construction site like that, that is being paid for by the construction company that's out there. What we are seeing a challenge with is as it pertains to the use currently of, let me just see where there was a strike through. I believe he added certain streets in here, but what we took out is under that A, under new language, and that is the Auburn Water and Sewer District, Lewiston Water and Sewer Division. We're finding that is becoming more of a challenge for us, when many times they will just maybe open a road, have a very small sign, but not really have any real traffic enforcement presence at that site. So we would propose striking that. That would require Auburn Water and Sewer District and Lewiston Water and Sewer District division. At times they are here. It would require them to hire an officer for those job sites on those specific roads. The next one is 52-150, which is parking during snow emergencies. This current recommendation is just to reflect the current current practice that we do. It's just to clean that language up. We do send out notifications. We use social media platforms to push out that information if we were to cancel a parking ban. 52-174 regarding bus stops. Recommended just strike any taxi stands from the ordinance as they no longer exist. 52-175 stopping and parking of buses and taxi cabs. See, the proposed language is just to add currently parking lots as permit parking areas. The Phoenix Block parking lot, we no longer have that. It's now, we do have the Pleasant Street, which is Court, and Hampshire Street. And then the Troy Street parking lot is no longer considered the same as a permitted parking area. There are some designated spaces that are used there, but it's not really a parking lot any longer as it was used in the past. And 52-183, we're recommending that just be stricken. We're not going to propose that. This is what we were looking at regarding people on a median, which is challenging. After already getting feedback from the city attorney, we'll be proposing not to move forward with that recommendation. And then, I believe that's it. I think we're moving into a section that we had already talked about which was day treatments. We don't need to talk about that any further. And that's it. Any question about those? Again, it's a lot in chapter 52, but most we're cleaning up as a result of the chief had staff go through and actually list out the state statutes that cover those sections. Councilor Walker.
Councilor Walker.
Yeah, I want to go back to the Esplanade again. I know somebody made some kind of deal with the Hilton for parking over there, but I'm going to say 75% of the time, there are no one parked in them spaces, and yet we're not allowed to use them at any time. I don't know how that deal got put into place, but I think it's a bad deal, and I think we need to look at how we park over there, when we park, and when the Hilton really needs that, because they have that closed 24 hours a day for people that can't find places to park down here because they want to deal with the bank or whatever it may be.
So they're paying for those parking spaces. That's probably something to make sure that you're aware of. So those are actually paid every month for those parking spaces and for their use. What I can do is, it might be good for me to provide you with the actual agreement that was done, so you'll have all the details on that as it pertains to the Hilton.
If we were to build a new building down there, that whole plan of giving them parking spaces like they have would have to change, wouldn't it?
So the language just says that it has to be X amount of parking spaces within a certain area, closest to Hilton as possible. There's been conversations at another building over there, would that be what trips, adding a parking garage or whatever? You can move that within that area. That does allow you to move it. I believe that there are some priorities as far as certain areas, but if you were to say, we're going to build something right here where that current lot is, it just means we'd have to move those available spaces somewhere else. It does allow you to do that, if they're not available.
I still think it's something we should be looking at because they're dead center of that parking lot down there. And it causes a lot of problems when we try to have something downtown, that they've got it closed off and nobody's parking there. Just, whether they're paying for it or not, it makes no sense to me to put people coming and wanting to use the bank or something else, they can't park.
I think, and maybe as a side note, probably not relative to this question with the ordinance, but a complete parking overview, because what you're seeing coming out of modern urban planning, the comp plan review process, is that parking, public municipal lots, especially free lots, are actually counterproductive to the value of our city. So I think it's something that we need to look at, a full inventory of street lots, garage, and so forth, and really what the need is. So I know we've been talking about this. I know we're going to be talking about it, Councilor McLeod and myself, in the next couple days here. So I think that should probably address what we need to do to have a vibrant downtown. And it also dovetails into that earlier workshop on city-owned property.
I will dig up the language. It's been a little while since I looked at it. I don't remember if there's a end date on that. I don't believe so. I think it's just part of that agreement, but I'll take a look.
Is there any other questions? No? None being, I'm going to close. Are you all set, Phil? I'm all set. You're good? Okay. We're going to move on to council communications about the community, and to the community. I have nothing. Is there any councilor that has a communication update for the city? No communications? Okay, very good. We're going to move on then. Open session. Open this up to the first open session of the night. Members of the public are invited to speak to the council about any issue directly related to city business, which is not on tonight's agenda. Members that would like to speak, you can step up to the podium in the community room, or you can use the raise hand icon on Zoom. Please do so now, and limit your comments to 3 minutes and state your name and address. We're not on Zoom. Good to go, okay. No one in the community room? Okay, we're going to bring it back here to the council. We have no unfinished business at this time, but we do have new business. First is ordinance 01-0201-2021. This is amending the zoning map, adjusting the boundary to remove the parcel at 186 Main Street from the T4.2 form-based district and include the parcel in the T51 form-based district. This is a first reading. I'll entertain a motion at this time.
So moved. Second.
Councilor Carrier and then Councilor Milks on a second. Open this up to the public. Are any members of the public that would like to speak? If so, please step up to the podium in the community room. And there is nobody in the community room, so I'm going to assume no. Bring this back to the council. Council, this is a follow-up from the workshop we had on Monday. Is there any debate? None being?
Mr. Mayor, I would just note for the public that the second reading, this will include a public hearing. For time purposes, it was just not enough time to get that posted, so the public hearing will be at your second reading.
That'll be on February 14th, correct?
With this item and your second item.
Okay, 14th, this is the second. Very good. Sue, could you do a roll call, please?
Counselor Walker,
Yes.
Counselor Boss,
Yes.
Counselor Gary,
Yes.
Counselor Lasagna,
Yes.
Counselor McLeod,
Yes.
Counselor Milks,
Yes.
Counselor Carrier,
Yes.
Motion passes first reading, 7-0. Next is ordinance 02-0201-2021, expanding the T4.2 traditional downtown neighborhood to replace current zoning in the multifamily urban district in the new Auburn neighborhood. This is again the first reading, second reading, and public comment will be on February 14th. I'll entertain a motion at this time.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor?
So moved.
What's the date?
Next meeting is February 14th? Did I get that right?
14th is Sunday, dear.
I'm sorry,
I mean,
February
Mr. Mayor.
15th. I apologize.
It's currently scheduled for the 15th. There'll be a motion in, I believe, later. Well, we already did it for the 16th, correct?
Yeah, during the consent.
Sorry, yeah. So it'll be the 16th.
16.
Sorry, I interrupted, Mr.
No, that's
Mayor.
very good. I'll entertain a motion at this time. No, thank you.
Second.
Motion from Counselor Carrier, second from Counselor Walker. Open this up to the public. Any members of the public that would like to speak on this? None being, I'm going to bring this back to the council. And council, before we open this up to debate, there was some questions, I think, during the workshop portion previously about how this would look and how this would affect certain neighborhoods. And Mr. Cousins and staff kind of gave us some examples here, and just like to turn it over to him for a minute or two to explain.
Not much more to add other than we just wanted to approximate the 25-foot setback line that currently exists in the zoning. This change would reduce that to a 5 to 15-foot range. If you look at the blue lines paralleling the streets here, you can see the gray buildings. The vast majority of the existing buildings are in front of those lines. They don't meet the current setbacks, which makes it really difficult for somebody to add on or to tear off a porch and replace it. The proposed setbacks will add a lot of flexibility in that regard.
Thank you. Any questions on this? They did provide earlier about 3 or 4 different examples. Ultimately, this will preserve and enhance property value and allow rehabilitations to happen and rebuilding. Okay, Sue, or is there any debate? I'm sorry. Comments, debate? None being. Sue, roll call, please.
Counselor Walker,
Yes.
Counselor Boss,
Yes.
Counselor Gary. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
And I haven't yet.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to say yes for the first reading.
Counselor Lasagna,
Yes.
Counselor McLeod,
Yes.
Counselor Milks,
Yes.
Counselor Carrier,
Yes.
The order passes first reading, 7-0. Next, we have order 12-020120, excuse me, order 11-02012021, appointing Glenn Holmes to the Auburn Lewiston Airport Board as a city manager representative.
So
I
moved.
got a motion from Councilor McLeod, second from Councilor Gary. Open this up to the public. Any members of the public that would like to speak against Glenn Holmes, please step forward, please. I'll give it a couple extra minutes. Bring it back to the council for debate. Council, anybody strongly object to Mr. Holmes? No? All those in favor of appointing Glenn Holmes to the airport board, please raise your hand. 7-0. That's your one freebie, Mr. Holmes. Welcome to Auburn. We have order 12-02012021, appointing Eric Cousins to the Androscoggin Transportation Resource Center, Policy Committee, excuse me, replacing the city manager. Making progress. I'll entertain a motion at this time.
So moved.
Second.
Cloud, second from Councilor Walker. Anybody in the public would like to speak on this? None being, I'll bring this back to the council. Council, any debate? Discussion? Bill?
I would just say, you all have seen Eric. His knowledge is very useful, and having him at that table is very beneficial for us as a city.
Very good then. Bring it back to a vote. All those in favor of appointing Eric Cousins to ATRC passes 7-0. We're now into the second open session of the night, but there is nobody in the community room, so we're going to close this open session. We're going to move on to reports. Mayor's report. I'd like to encourage everyone to pay attention to the comp plan review process. Please go online. We do have a series of subcommittee meetings. You will find the schedule of all subcommittee and full meetings on the website, Auburn City Hall, the Auburn City website. Go down to comp plan review. There's everything, maps, all sorts of great information. We encourage you all to log in, especially if there's a topic of interest. I will say we're accelerating the progress of the comp plan review. We're getting amazing, I like to call it consensus on items. You'll be seeing that consensus come forward to the council for action in a bit, if you would, kind of a piecemeal, if you would, fashion, because some of this could have a great economic impact and equity impact to the residents. So come be part of this debate. Let us know what you're thinking. And members of the public, please chime in as well with great ideas. We've had a lot so far. Second, there were some meetings last week and this week with Central Maine Medical Center, St. Mary's, about mass vaccine sites. Areas are still yet to be determined. They're reviewing several areas in downtown and not downtown, both in Auburn and Lewiston. I'd expect more information to come out in the near future about which locations are going to be stood up. So expect that in the future. I know they're all working extremely long hours to make all this happen. So that's it for my reports. Turn it off to the council. Any reports from councilors? Councilor Carrier, no. Councilor Walker?
I'd like to just remind people that we're going to have the Valentine spaghetti dinner that you can pick up at the Senior Center at Pettingill Park on the 14th, 12 to 2 o'clock. You still have time to call that in, but you're running out of time fast. So if you'd like that dinner, it's free. Make sure you call the Recreation Department and order it, and then you'll be requested to pick it up at a certain time and date. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Milks? Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess the grab-and-go groceries on Wednesday is going to be on Thursday this week due to the storm. And as far as I was told, that they're going to follow the same time schedule for whatever time they delivered it, wherever. That's what they're going to try to do on Thursday as well.
Very good. I just want to go, Councilor Walker.
Yeah, I should have also said the age-friendly meeting for tomorrow night is being moved to the next Tuesday, so it'll be the 9th. We're going to meet at 5:30 on the 9th, the Senior Center.
I just want to clarify, because I made a mistake. Thank you for pointing that out, Councilor Gary. Our next meeting will be the Tuesday after President's Day. That's February 16th. So, and that was in our consent items. I got my dates wrong. I was so excited about Valentine's Day, it was all shaky. So, thank you for that. Sorry about the confusion, but February 16th. Councilor McLeod?
Just to echo your comments on the comp plan, please come out and give us your input to that. As he said, we're accelerating the process in order to kind of piecemeal it through, so we don't have to wait for a full, complete plan before it starts seeing its way to the planning board and to here to hopefully jumpstart some projects.
The Edward Little Building Committee meeting has been moved to March. So I know that we wanted to have them come report out to us. I've spoken to Adam about setting something up, but it will probably happen after March as opposed to after a February meeting.
Just one update from Ag Committee. We're going to be hosting the Maine Farm to Institution, MEFT, to talk about opportunities for encouraging local procurement by institutions in our area. We're also talking about, with USDA reps, about different opportunities for growing infrastructure and for processing and market development. So lots of good work that I'm really excited about. And that's it for me.
Is that going to be a virtual? Is that virtual?
Yes, we're meeting virtually.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I just have a few things. One is parking ban. So there is a parking ban that's starting tonight at 10 p.m. Will run until tomorrow night at 10 p.m. The Public Works and PD get together and work on the best timing based on knowledge they have regarding the storm. Whether or not Auburn Hall closes tomorrow will depend on what our storm looks like in the morning. However, we do have capability as a result of COVID where a great deal of our staff can telework at this point. So those staff members that can telework, just to ensure safe traveling, we will do that. As far as the school presentation, Councilor Lasagna had mentioned, we're going to schedule that for March 15th. Hopefully that will be plenty of time. We'll have a joint meeting on March 15th with the school board. At that meeting, we'll do hopefully the high school. That's still pending. And then, but we will have the CIP, joint CIP presentation with the school. And we will have, if there's any other items, and I believe we'll also be adopting or presenting for you to adopt anyway, the audit. Jill, is that correct? All right, so March 15th. So that's what will take place on that date. So with a joint meeting with the school board, we'll be able to hopefully cover much of that. We had, the mayor and I participated in the LPC, which is the Legislative Policy Committee for Maine Municipal Association, looking at the various bills that are being brought forward for consideration. The mayor and I chimed in on several of these bills as they were being brought forward, those that we believe Maine Municipal, as our representative, should pay attention to and speak at the state legislator level as it pertains to these. That was a full day as we went through all those, but I believe the team, and there are representatives from each district. The mayor and I are both voting members on that, with Brian as our alternate, so we have good representation from Auburn on the LPC meetings. But we will see several bills. As those bills proceed through the process, I'll be sure to keep you apprised of those that certainly have an impact on our local community. At our last meeting, Councilor Walker asked about Soper's Mills Road and a culvert that was going to be replaced there. Councilor Walker and I were able to meet this week with the city engineer. I do have the plans here if anybody wants to take a look at what that plan will look like. The plan is in alignment with what a state requires for changing out a culvert. It does have an impact on that area, as Councilor Walker's concerned. And Councilor Walker, I do have for you, I'll provide to you afterwards, but if anyone else needs it, it's the study that was done by Inland Fish and Wildlife relating to the impacts on the wildlife in that area based on that and their recommendation to move forward with it. Our last step, based on my conversation with Councilor Walker, will be having a conversation with the owner, and staff is currently, owner of that property is currently doing that. However, it has been posted, has not been accepted yet as a project, but within this project, there was a grant that was assigned to this as well. So I believe, Jill, correct me if I'm wrong, were we paying 30%, do you recall? About 30% of this project? I believe it's 30% of the project. The rest is covered by the grant. So that's the update from Councilor Walker's inquiry about Soper's Mills Road. We'll continue working through that and do that final checkup with that property owner. Lastly, I just want to thank Brian Susi, who's behind the scenes doing audio. Hopefully you've seen a difference tonight with our sound. If you're in the other room, I believe you're going to hear even a better in the community room if you're in there observing. But he's done a great job. He and his team have worked really hard making this so that people can hear us better. We're not moving our mics. We don't even need to really move close. He's got it set based on each one of you as an individual. It's been programmed that way. So he's done a great job being able to do that. And hopefully those viewing will be able to hear it as well. But I just want to thank Brian for his hard work that he's been doing on that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
That's the last report for tonight. Next, we have an executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA Section 405 to discuss an economic development matter. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Councilor Gary, second from Councilor Boss. All those in favor? Opposed? None being. For the public watching at home, we will enter into executive session. We have no further actionable items or debate on tonight's schedule, so we will turn off TV. Aaron, we now stand in executive session.